How's everybody doing? Yeah, I guess we're not on theme as science fiction, although some might say that esports has some science and some fiction in it. So look, excited to have Akshay here with me, who was my partner in investing in Team Dignitas. And I think a great place to start is that when you have an ownership group like the one Akshay works for, they own not only the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA, they also own the New Jersey Devils in the National Hockey League. And they recently purchased Crystal Palace in the English Premier League. So with those esteemed assets and all that you guys have to do, why'd you get into esports? What drove your interest?
You know, it's interesting. It's a question that we're getting less and less, which is, I think, a fascinating insight into how people are thinking about esports. So we would get this question anytime we had a conversation about it. You know, why esports? What is esports, et cetera? And as much as I want to say the honest answer is, you told us to get in there, so I hope you're not having cold feet about it. But the story is, you know, the NBA especially considers itself a fairly progressive league, and you know, I think within the world of traditional sports that tends to be true. And the conversation around esports began for our owners, who are investors by nature, and you know, that's obviously how they have been incredibly successful. And at a board meeting of the NBA, the commissioner and some of his folks were talking about esports and about the viewership numbers around competitive gaming. And you know, everyone there has big egos, and no one was happy about people watching other people play video games more than they're watching the NBA Finals. And it's a staggering statistic that really, I think, took a lot of owners took them a little bit by storm. And so that's really what began the process for us about learning about the industry and questioning both whether we should invest there, but also what specific vehicle for investment, which we ended up acquiring Team Dignitas and Team Apex and merging them under the Team Dignitas banner. But look, as we learned more, for us it was a pretty unique opportunity to invest behind an industry where the number of viewers, the number of participants was staggering, staggeringly high, incredibly global, very positive demographics, but the scale of the businesses, and I know this is something we'll talk about a lot more, so the scale of the businesses were pretty small. And I think once you hear about opportunities where those two factors are the case, it really leads to one of two options, right? Either this, you know, the bells of opportunity should be ringing in your head, and this is an industry that is ripe for monetization, or this is an industry that will never be monetized. And those are the polar opposite realities of a situation where there's such a discrepancy between the scale of revenues that are present, you know, outside of the publishers and the sheer number of people that are involved. And that's really, for us, it was an exciting opportunity to use some of our assets and leverage some of the resources that we were able to bring to the table to grow a business, hopefully we hope manyfold.
How much of the calculus that you guys did when you looked at the opportunity was based on the demographic profile of the people spectating and how they were consuming media relative to your existing fan bases?
So I would say in isolation that was incredibly important to us, because I think the natural segue there is to say, okay, if there is an overlap between a Sixers fan or a Devils fan or a Crystal Palace fan and a Team Dignitas fan, what are you doing to cross-market your properties? Or if there isn't, then where are the synergies? And what I would say is, in isolation, our belief was the demographics are very appealing and very positive. And we believed that we had a set of resources at our disposal, whether it was on the sales and marketing side or PR or branding or you know, our sort of ability to create really highly viewed digital content. You know, we felt we could leverage those skills. And so really the transfer of skills here has been from sort of the parent company, the Sixers, the Devils, and Palace, towards the Team Dignitas banner. But the demographics played a huge role. And I don't think we would have been this excited about the space if the demographics were either, if the scale were smaller or if the types of consumers and the manner in which they were consuming the content were different.
So the younger users who weren't necessarily watching sports or content on television, you know, the cord cutters or the cord nevers, that kind of was an impetus in the sense that you're not reaching those people as an ownership of a sports team, and by God, you better, or maybe you're going to wake up in a decade or so and wonder what happened to your fan base?
Sure. You know, I think at its core level, the folks at ESPN, you know, you've been following what's been happening at ESPN for the last few days. That's been a stark reminder to all of us that if we don't adapt to the changes in the consumption of content, at the end of the day, that is what drives the revenues for traditional sports teams. And we have a lot to learn from our Team Dignitas fans on how we can create better content and how we can distribute that content in a differentiated manner. So we're gonna do a little Abbott and Costello act. So now my turn to ask you. You know, I referred a little bit to the scale of the businesses here, and a lot of the articles that we are now starting to see in the media are, okay, everyone is excited about esports, but where is the money going to come from? Obviously, you have a lot of knowledge in this industry. You know, what are the variables that are going to impact the ways in which these businesses scale?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. I think the data. You guys have probably always seen it. You know, there's close to 250 million people that would call themselves a fan of an esports somewhere in the world. But on average, they're spending less than $1 against their passion of that fan base, which compares, at least here in the US, to something more on the magnitude of $75 if you're a fan of the NFL or Major League Baseball. So the gap is massive. And I think, you know, look, the good news is that unlike any other business I've ever invested in, here's one where the market already existed. People that have been playing competitive video games for a long time decided they wanted structure. They wanted the professional, the best players in the world to be on the big stage in a way that they can consume it. They built the business in the absence, really, of the publishers or entrepreneurs building it. That's great. The challenge is, unlike basketball or hockey or soccer, no one owns that intellectual property. Here we have game publishers with, you know, market caps of tens of billions of dollars with existing business models who kind of, you know, just watched esports happen as a part of their marketing or their community outreach and not something that was a fundamental new business. And so we have this challenge of how do we work with publishers in a way that they think fulfills you know, the brand identification and the marketing dynamics and goals that they have, while at the same time teasing away the esports opportunity in a way that doesn't get conflicted with their desire to either sell their games for $60 at retail or to do microtransactions. And I think we're really in the early stages of it. We've seen, you know, the Valves of the world be completely laissez-faire, and that's led to a certain amount of you know, success for them with Dota 2 and with Counter-Strike Go. But also some challenges. You know, Riot's taken a more hands-on approach, and they've probably built to date the most successful esport business. Activision Blizzard is talking a lot about what they want to do with Overwatch. But we have to fundamentally solve the dynamic of how the ecosystem gets created so that people that are selling merchandise, tickets to events, the team owners, the players, can all go and build the business as big as they want to without the publisher in some way governing the engine.
And is there an inflection point or a series of inflection points that you see going forward where we will be able to be at that stage and say, if not definitively, then at least with some degree of confidence, this really is an industry that can be monetized, whether it's by us, the franchises, or by other players in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, look, I think we're going to have to be patient. I think, you know, Riot has kind of iterated on the LCS and made it slightly more independent of the rest of their business. And I think you're going to see them move a direction towards franchising, and they did a deal with Major League Baseball's Advanced Media Group for the media rights that was substantial. And I think those are signs that they're looking for the ecosystem to be not based on League of Legends revenue, but actually esports revenue. Mm-hmm. I think, again, with what Blizzard is doing with Overwatch, it's going to be interesting. I also think you're going to see some publishers that have some scale think about whether they want to be part of an independent league structure think a little bit more like the Microsoft Xbox or the PlayStation, where somebody whose expertise is in building an esports business and a league structure, where the content, if it happens to be the most successful and appealing to spectators, sees the most revenue. But regardless, you're going to see more infrastructure, really smart people like yourself that have expertise entering the space, and I think making the opportunity better for the fan because there's more we can do for them, better for us as team owners. So let me come back to you. So you guys are the first Western traditional sports ownership to buy into a team. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier, where are there areas where you guys think you have leverage in making a successful esports team? And where do you think there are things that are unique to this space where you have to be humble and maybe learn a little bit?
So I'll tackle the second part of that first because I think it's been a great learning experience for us. And I think a personal favorite anecdote of mine. So one of the ways that we like to entertain, or our version of wining and dining, if you will, is bringing people to the game. Right? It's an incredible experience. I grew up a sports fan. Sitting courtside at a basketball game never gets old. We had the opportunity to create a unique hospitality experience for a League of Legends player that we were courting at one point of time. And we brought him out to a game and didn't necessarily get the same reaction that one typically gets from someone who is sitting courtside at a basketball game. And no, it didn't have anything to do with the fact that he was watching a 10-win Sixers team. But the realization eventually dawned upon me, and I asked him, is this, are you a big basketball fan? Not really. How many games do you typically go to, or like how many games you've been to? First game ever. So this kid's sitting courtside at his first ever basketball game and staring at his phone the entire time. And I got it. Like I understood. It hurt. Yeah. It hurt as a basketball fan, and my ego was bruised, but I got it. And I think that, in a small way, encapsulates what we need to understand about the audience here, which is very different than. And look, we understand that the audience that views a Sixers game is very different than one that views a Devils game, is very different than one that views a Crystal Palace game. But those differences are ones that we can wrap our heads around because at their core, they all have a unique passion for sports. The audience that typically views a Team Dignitas game is not only a different type of person, it is a different type of person consuming content in a totally different way than something that we are used to. And the humbling experience for us, and hopefully the one that will be a learning experience and one that we can, in the future, learn to best monetize and to create content to the best of our capabilities, and one that is incredibly compelling, is understanding that and appreciating that as fast and with as much gravity as possible, and realizing that that is a significant difference in how we get to distribute this very unique content.
So what about the flip side? What about the leverage you guys have with sponsors and the way that you've generated media, media revenue? How does that play in the esports space?
And that, I think, goes to a core part of our, one of the core tenets of our investment thesis here was we believe that we have the best sales and marketing organization in traditional sports. The process of going out and getting especially non-endemic sponsors, brands that are well known in the traditional sports space, or brands that are producing consumer products, for example, that every single person in this room consumes at a fairly regular level but had never been involved in gaming, going out and getting those brands, having those conversations, those were parts of the business that we felt that we had real expertise in.
So you're almost like a bridge between all of these big brands with a lot of money that want access to this demographic, don't have any idea what this esports thing is. It looks messy and ugly.
That's right. And our hope is we can go to those brands and say, we've done this before, you know us, you trust us, and we have experience in this field. And we're starting to see that. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of traction with a lot of big brands who have been doing exactly what you said. They have been waiting to enter this world because they see the demographics the way we see the demographics. And for them, it's even more compelling because this group of individuals is so hard to target in any other form of entertainment or any other form of advertising, and they need a shepherd to help guide them. And we would like to believe that that is a role that we're able to play. And we are seeing conversations with sponsors who previously may never have been partners of the Sixers or the Devils or Crystal Palace, but because we now also have an ownership stake in Team Dignitas, are entering into the negotiating table and are willing to be partners because of this very unique asset that we are able to sell to them. And that really, for us, was the single most compelling part of the investment thesis. Which, going on to investment thesis, brings me to a question that we get asked a lot. And I know you get asked a lot, and I know this was a core part of what we talked about during the diligence process, which is, there are a lot of folks in and around the esports space who are looking at investing in teams. Obviously, the publishers, for the most part, tend to be larger, publicly traded, or part of larger private corporations. What are other vehicles in which investors in esports can deploy their capital?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a couple areas that we're spending a lot of time looking at is merchandise. So I think you guys have shared that it's a meaningful portion of the revenue of the NBA, the NHL, and you guys as individual team sports franchises. It is a tiny fraction of the revenue in the esports space. And yet you have an audience that, arguably is a lot more engaged. Just look at Twitch, which is obviously the largest media outlet for esports fans. There's 120 million people that are active every month on Twitch. They spend between 45 minutes and an hour and a half a day. And when you look at the demographic profile, these people will spend a lot of money on the hobbies and the things that they care a lot about. So owning a team jersey, the sweatshirts, the pullovers, the shoes, all the things that can make them feel connected to this community and to their favorite team, it's a massive opportunity and one that I think barely has been touched. So that's top of mind. I'll tell you another one I think is really interesting, and some of this I get from having young kids, but it's youth esports. So the single most common activity shared among kids around the world, by far, playing video games. It's not even close.
I tried to tell my mom that when I was growing up, and she kicked me out of the house.
She made you go play soccer.
Some good that did me.
But the opportunity, in the same way that we as parents or communities invest in our school teams and our Little League teams and our AYSO soccer teams, why doesn't that exist in esports? Why isn't there a great opportunity to provide parents with taking an activity that sometimes they're a little questionable on and making it feel structured and value add, having coaches and volunteers? I think there's a really big opportunity there, and that's certainly one we're going to explore. So Akshay, curious a little bit about what you think happens from the perspective of your competitors. We've seen more announcements. You guys were the first of an organization, and subsequently I think we've probably seen another dozen announcements. What do you think happens to the existing ball and stick sports owners as the esports snowball starts to gain a little bit of momentum? What are the things we should all expect to see or hear about coming from the leagues or some of the other teams?
I think my guess is it's going to be a twofold response. On the one side, you're going to see more traditional sports team owners and their organizations, and it is important to distinguish between owners, wealthy owners investing in franchises out of their family offices, and teams investing in organizations out of the team infrastructure. Those are two very different propositions. I think you will start to see more of the latter, which is what we believed in, and the reason why this was done under the Philadelphia 76ers umbrella and not under our owner's family office umbrella.
Yep.
Because I think there will be a greater realization, frankly, of the ability of sports teams and the resources that we hope to bring to really help shape the outcome of these organizations, especially on the business side.
Do you think their interest accelerates as franchising comes about and some of the league infrastructure we talked about a minute ago starts to get cemented a little bit?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, when we think about what worried us the most when we made our investment, which was 8 months ago now, or 6 months ago now, it was the fragmentation of this space. And it was, where is the centralized body that is going to help create the infrastructure that's necessary to get us interested as a franchise in a broader opportunity? And I think as that starts to happen, more traditional team owners get more comfortable with investing larger pools of capital in the space. And I think the second part of this is what the NBA has now in the process of doing, which is setting up leagues of games whereby they think that they have the ability to go out and get new audiences, right? So the NBA announced the creation, along with Take-Two Interactive, of the NBA 2K League. And historically, I think sporting games, and you know this from your days at Electronic Arts, but sporting games haven't had the same appeal in the esports world as League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike. And the folks at the NBA have a very interesting take on it, which is, at the end of the day, if we're able to connect with people who've never been to a basketball game, who've never bought a jersey, but who play NBA 2K, and if we can start to communicate with them and maybe get them to show up to a game, or buy a jersey, or buy League Pass, or whatever it takes to get that fan more engaged, even if we can get them to bounce a basketball, that is a success story that the league is able to write through very non-traditional means. And my guess is more leagues and more properties start to do that.
More as a marketing angle than really an esports.
That's exactly right.
Ecosystem. Hey, I know we're out of time. You know, one other thing I wanted to touch on. You know, I think one of the questions we all have. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about VR today. You know, people are wondering, is it a fad? Is esports a fad? And I'll tell you my quick 2 cents on it. You know, I've got a 12-year-old son. He plays soccer, he plays basketball, he's a fanatical skier, loves sports. But you know what he does with his time consuming media? It's not watching sports on TV. By a factor of 20 to 1, he is watching other people play video games. That is a secular shift, not only for him, but all of his friend base in school, and it's been going on since he was 6 years old when he was watching Minecraft videos. It is a fundamental seed change. Around the world, there are billions of kids under the age of 18 who will graduate high school having consumed way more spectating content of people playing video games than they have ball and stick sports. And to me, that's the secular wave that makes esports something that's going to matter and be around for a long, long time.
I knew I should have been a gamer instead of a soccer player.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you taking the time.